Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the very first virtual conference panel on diversity and inclusion. I'm Leon Stevenson, and I'm a partner at Reed Smith, and I'm really pleased to be moderating this panel together with my partner, Bronwyn Jones. Now, before introducing the panelists, I wanted to say a few words about why diversity and inclusion is so crucial to the funds finance industry. We've seen that the industry has been very adaptable and diverse itself, in the sense that there've been a diversity of funds. We've had credit funds emerging from 2008 to plug the gap of banks in the lending market. We've seen secondary funds that have provided investors with liquidity. And more recently, with COVID and lockdown, we've seen special situations funds, which have been able to provide liquidity to those portfolio companies that are in need of it. We've seen diversity of lenders. When I first started over 15 years ago in this industry, there were perhaps 2 or 3 lenders providing subline facilities. Now we have at least 60 or 70 lenders actively providing funds finance. We've seen diversity of products, not just sublines, but we've seen NAV facilities, hybrids, Manco and co-investment facilities. We've seen SMAs and we've seen umbrella facilities. But what about diversity of people? How does diversity of people fit with the principal objectives of the funds industry to maximize returns for investors? Do investors really care about diversity in the same way as a law firm has to show diversity statistics to bank clients? And although certain events of this year have clearly touched people in relation to racial inequality, is it really touching the funds finance industry? Now, we've carefully assembled a world-class panel of people here, including one of the largest PE funds in the world, the founder of a groundbreaking fund strategy which relates to investing in diverse management boards. We have the leading private equity association in the UK, and we also have a leading law firm. So without further ado, I'd like each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, starting with Rodney.
Thank you very much, Leon, and great to be invited to this panel. My name is Rodney Appiah, and I'm the chair and co-founder of Cornerstone Partners. Cornerstone Partners is an innovative angel network and one of the largest in the UK, focused on investing into businesses led by Black and diverse founders. It's a pleasure to meet you all, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Rodney. And Bola?
Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Bola Osakwe, and I lead KKR's inclusion and diversity efforts globally. I'm excited to join the panel and speak to everyone today, so thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bola. Gurpreet. Hi, Gurpreet.
Hi there, I'm Gurpreet Manku. I'm the BVCA's Deputy Director General and Director of Policy. The BVCA represents private equity and venture capital firms with a base in the UK.
Hi, I think you're on mute. Delighted to join the other panelists today. I'm Sheena Fraser. I'm counsel in Mayor Brown's London office, and I work within the restructuring practice. Very much looking forward to the conversation today.
Certainly not least, Bron.
Thank you, Leon. I'm co-head of fund finance at Reed Smith alongside Leon. We work together, keeping the practice together, moving forwards and doing exciting things like this.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, everyone, for participating in this panel, and thank you, the audience, for making time aside for this really important subject matter. So the first question I have goes to Rodney. Rodney, can you please tell the audience why you decided to set up Cornerstone Partners? And is the funds finance industry and the funds industry currently failing as it relates to ethnic diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first thing I'd want to say is that the idea of Cornerstone Partners was very much an organic one, and it came about through the coming together of friends that had all been relatively successful in the city, but had a desire to want to make a difference, had a desire to want to provide some support and some tangible impact to our community. And I think we looked at some of the barriers that some of the businesses led by individuals that looked like us had sort of felt and had faced, and we wanted to contribute to being part of the solution. So, we started very humbly with sort of collecting sort of £5,000 each. There were 6 co-founders in the first instance. That led to a £30,000 pot. And I'm pleased to say that over the next 5 years, we've been able to kind of turn that into just close to £1 million, invested into just shy of 15 businesses across the UK, businesses across a range of sectors, including technology, consumer retail, events, travel, etc. And I think what's really exciting about the idea of sort of supporting these businesses is that you can see the innovation and the dynamism coming through in this largely ignored part of the market, and that's the thing that we want to try and address. We just want to raise a sort of attention and shine a spotlight on the innovation that's been seen amongst these types of businesses. And so that in a nutshell is the story around Cornerstone Partners, and keen to continue to grow that impact over time.
Just to clarify, Rodney, in terms of your investment strategy, am I right in thinking it's focusing on ethnic diverse management boards? So it's actually quite different, quite groundbreaking in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. I think we have a sort of a focus on targeting businesses led by Black and diverse founders, and by diverse we refer to both inherent diversity, so things like age, race, and gender, things that you're born with effectively, and then acquired diversity, so diversity of experiences, diversity of thought, diversity of skill sets and functions, diversity of living in different countries. And actually, when you combine these two elements of diversity together, we find that you unlock teams that have a higher propensity to outperform versus their non-diverse counterparts. And so it's a commercially driven strategy, as well as one that ultimately serves sort of the moral imperative of increasing funding to diverse communities, which I think, we know, looking at statistics that suggest that less than 1% of VC capital is currently attracted by ethnic minority-led businesses. It's clearly something needs to be done, something needs to be addressed. And so we're very, very proud to be part of the answer to try and address that balance. But more importantly than that, we want to find exciting, fast-growing businesses led by exceptional teams, and we believe those exceptional teams tend to be diverse.
Thank you, Rodney. And I think already we're seeing this connectivity, if you like, or the need to connect ethnic diversity with making returns, because obviously we're in the funds and funds finance industry where it's all about returns. So it's kind of trying to bring those two subject matters, if you like, together. Gurpreet, I'll be curious, as a senior person at the BVCA, the British Venture Capital Association, you obviously see the whole spectrum of funds, from the kind of VCs, which clearly seem to be quite innovative, quite focused on this particular issue, right up to the really big players where, we'll hear from Bola later, but there may be some question marks around, are the big players focusing as much as the VCs? What's your personal experience actually in that?
So I might just start looking at the data, because over the summer I was asked many times, what's the level of investment going into Black founders, Black and ethnic diverse management teams, and there wasn't really very much data available in the UK, but that has stepped up in recent months. So I thought I'd just touch on a few things. Overall, what it does show is that the level of investment into founders and management teams from different ethnic backgrounds in the UK is low. And that's interesting, given that we make up 14% of the UK's population. So the Black Report, produced by 10 by 10 in partnership with Google for Startups, looked at the perspective of pre-seed Black founders, and that showed limited funding from angel investors and venture capital. And this was further substantiated in a recent report from Extend Ventures called Diversity Beyond Gender, that showed that between 2009 and 2019, just 1.7% of venture capital at all stages went to entrepreneurs from Black and multi-ethnic communities, with just 0.24% going to teams of Black entrepreneurs. So just remember, again, this is a context of 14% of the UK population from being different ethnic backgrounds. The British Business Bank has also been publishing a lot of diversity data recently, following the creation of a scheme for venture and funding, equity funding, in response to the COVID crisis. And that scheme is called the Future Fund, and it provides convertible loans under certain conditions. The data published in October showed that 60% of the funding to date, which is around, I think, 770 million, went to mixed ethnicity management teams. But again, when you look at the data more closely, less than 4% went to people from different ethnic backgrounds. I mentioned the British Business Bank there. They've done some work recently with Oliver Wyman looking at the perspective of entrepreneurs in the UK from different backgrounds, and again found that people from ethnic minority backgrounds experience substantially worse business outcomes than white entrepreneurs. So, and they're also working with the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities in the UK, which was set up by the government to look at barriers to entrepreneurship and access to finance. So a lot of data there, and I mentioned it just because I think it's an area that is very interesting. I didn't have access to this much data only a few months ago. But what about the private equity and venture capital industry itself? Here, the data on ethnic diversity is really limited. So the BVCA is currently conducting a survey with one of the groups that we work with a lot in the UK called Level 20, which is focused on diversity and inclusion. Another group that we also work with quite a bit is called Diversity BC. Now, I've often heard that it's very difficult to aggregate information or get information on people's backgrounds because it's a protected characteristic under GDPR, which is the case. But we think that there are ways to collect information and address the GDPR concerns out there. So we've reached out to our members, which includes private equity and venture capital firms. Level 20 has done the same. And we've created a framework or a template for firms to use to help collect this information, which does need to be self-reported, but it also needs to be asked for in the right way. And the reason why I've fixated on data just a little bit here is because whilst, yes, again, all the comments around the need to avoid groupthink and the business benefits of it all are important, I think when you're looking at bringing together a true picture of the industry, yes, we know the numbers are low, but getting industry-wide data is helpful not just for us, but also for associations of investors like ILPA or investors themselves who I know are looking into this area. And we're here to help aggregate information and show what the picture looks like for the industry as a whole. I think data helps spur action, and it also gives you a metric on which to measure the impact of those actions. And just from a personal perspective, we run a number of events. We moved beyond gender a few years ago to branch out to look at all aspects of diversity and inclusion, and it is comforting and heartwarming to see that there is a mix of people working in this industry, perhaps not so much at senior levels. So one of the things that we want to do is just make sure there's a lot more visibility, because I think when there is more visibility and people can see a pathway to senior positions, it does help the industry overall.
Thanks, Britt. And I think you've alluded to a key item in this discussion, which is data. And obviously, how can you enhance diversity and inclusion if you don't know where you're starting from? And you mentioned the various data protection issues around that. But as you say, I think there are solutions around that, and it's incumbent on all of us to identify what these solutions are. I think I'll hand over to Bron actually at this point in time. Bron, did you want to pick up the next question?
I can do, Leon, although I think Bruce may be able to join us now. So I don't know if you want to introduce him.
Hi, we've got Bruce from SMBC. Hopefully, Bruce, hi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello, everyone.
Oh, fantastic, brilliant, good to have you on the panel. We are just going to, I think, move to Bron, who's going to go with the next question.
Thank you, Leon. Bola, this is actually a question. I'm going to start off with you on this. Do the Tier 1 lending, private equity and debt funds see diversity and inclusion as essential to ensuring a successful fundraise, deployment of capital and generation of returns? Or is D&I just a tick-the-box requirement?
Thank you for that question, Bronwyn. Look, I think that as a whole, the industry directionally is starting to see value as a collective around having diversity within our own organizations. Now, I won't say that that doesn't mean that we have a lot of work to do and that organizations are at various stages along this journey. You know, when I think about KKR and Henry Kravis and George Roberts thinking around diversity and inclusion, 5 years ago, the firm decided that an individual like myself was necessary to help drive the firm's progress. And I think really because it was a real understanding that we needed to evolve the diversity of our firm and our organization with a belief that it would help us drive our performance as an organization and continue to remain successful within the industry. And so I think that, other large private equity firms are increasingly brought along on this journey and increasingly focused on diversity and inclusion from the perspective of their organization, but also increasingly focused on it from a portfolio perspective and wanting to ensure that there's an ability to have impact on the broader ecosystem. So driving that diversity and inclusion influence to the companies in which we own and do business with.
Thank you, Bola. It's good to it's a good answer. It's good to hear that it is more than just a tick the box exercise, and that organisations like KKR are taking this and have been for a while, taking this really seriously, and beginning to see the benefits that it can bring. I was going to ask a couple of questions next of to both Bruce, probably Bruce first, and then Sheena. From the banks and law firms' perspective, why should D&I be important to the services that you provide to the funds finance industry? And what measures have you put in place to ensure greater diversity and inclusion with respect to servicing your clients? Bruce, do you want to kick off with that one?
Yeah, sure. And I think that the second part of that question is very important to the first part as well, because I think we have spoken quite a bit about the importance of the business case. And the lending case in having diversity and inclusion in the firms that we invest in or lend to, how that creates true cognitive diversity and really contributes to the bottom line. But for the banks and I suppose the law firms as well to really try to push that case, I mean, it's a moral case as well, and we could be accused of hypocrisy if we weren't doing it in our own firms. So I think that there is a strong sense, certainly with us, that we have to be seen to walk the walk ourselves if we're making that case to our borrowers or to our clients. So I mean, I did want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in the bank, and I think there has been an added momentum, surely this year, that has arisen from Black Lives Matter, that has come from our own employees, but that the firm has looked to match. And I think, I think probably the law firms may have a similar story, but perhaps some of the very, very largest banks already had particularly race and ethnicity structures in place, but many banks didn't. And there's a kind of second wave that has come up through this year. And so I think my message to everyone on the panel and in the conference is, it is not too late to pick up on many of these issues. You can really build momentum. And I think it's been a year of doing a lot to strengthen our diversity framework by working with our employees. So I think it's a very exciting and interesting year for diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Bruce. Sheena, can you give us a bit of a view from a law firm perspective, please?
Sure. So I think, again, Bruce said a lot about why it's so important for banks and for law firms. It's really at the top of a lot of our clients' agendas, and therefore is becoming at the top of our agenda. And at Mayer Brown, we've tried really hard to actually put in place proper processes and initiatives to try and really change our culture internally. So like with many law firms and businesses, we do have a number of networks. So we have a BAME network fusion. We also have a new social mobility working group because there's so many synergies between our BAME network and social mobility. So that's becoming very important to look at diversity on all fronts, as well as an established women's network and also an LGBTQ network. So those networks really are there to raise awareness, to try and create an inclusive environment. And you know, recently it was really interesting. We, as a BAME network, which I'm on the steering committee for, we hosted an event, a debate on colour braveness versus colour blindness, and that had over 100 attendees across the firm coming onto a Zoom chat, and we really had an open and honest discussion, and being able to provide those safe spaces where everyone can talk about their experiences, talk about their views. That does so much in raising awareness across a platform, and we had attendance across all levels to that. I think also as a firm, we really want to commit openly to diversity. So we have joined the Mansfield Rule, and we are looking to have recruitment into leadership and governance roles, whereby we have 30% of women, or at least women, ethnic minority, LGBTQ candidates for all leadership roles within law firms. So I think that's quite exciting for us, and that's been launched in the US and is coming through into the UK also. At a junior level, I think we've made some significant strides. We've been working with diverse law organisations like Aspiring Solicitors to really have a diverse graduate intake, and we're seeing that come through in our last few intakes. So that's been great, and partnering with these sorts of organisations is fantastic, because they have a bank of great candidates who have worked really, really hard, passionate about the law, and to be able to work with them and tap into that is critical for getting this, you know, diverse graduate level intake. I think one more kind of important point to note is we're really looking at doing this top down. So in terms of partner performance reviews, actually having partners required to report on their diversity activities, on their commitment, what they have actually done within their own teams. That's come in quite recently, and I think that's incredibly important to show that across the organisation, this is important to driving change within kind of the legal community, but also showing our clients that, you know, our partners care, who are ultimately the people who bring in the business.
That's great to hear. Some of that resonates from my own law firm, but that's great to hear all of that's moving forward. Leon, I think I'm handing back to you now.
Yes, thanks, Juan. And Sheena, I'm really pleased to hear about some of those initiatives. I completely agree with you that it should be from top downwards as well as from bottom upwards. And it's crucial that you get role models in those positions who act like role models and are seen as role models. I think it's absolutely crucial if we're going to get the momentum that we want from this. Just moving a little bit back to the funds finance industry, because I'm conscious that this is the Funds Finance Association event, and I think it's really important to link these two subject matters. I spent many weeks and months thinking about how diversity is important for the funds finance industry, and I think we do want to get to a place where it really is right at the forefront. So I had a question for the panelists here, which was, shouldn't there be more focus by the lenders on incentivizing their fund clients to invest in businesses that have diverse management teams and employees, in the same way as ESG has taken off in the funds finance industry? I think anyone in the funds finance industry has seen the great number of deals, ESG deals, that have happened recently. And my question really is that really taking into account ethnic diversity as much as it's taking into account, for example, environmental issues and gender diversity? Maybe that question to Bolo again, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, happy to answer. Look, I think there's, from a large GP perspective, there's work to be done in terms of leaning in to support minority fund managers, emerging managers, companies that are owned by minorities, broadly speaking. I think the most recent events over the last few months have gotten the large GPs to start thinking about what are the ways in which they can really drive impact within the industry and be a bit broader in their thinking in terms of their investing. I think there are probably few examples that can be cited that were in effect in advance of the last few months. But I think more recently, there's been a greater focus in terms of large GPs thinking about who can they partner with. In addition, how do they think about sort of supplier diversity and the impact that that can have on the broader ecosystem in terms of supporting the economics around vendors and minority-owned businesses. So I think, look, the short answer, Leon, to your question is there's definitely more work to be done. I think we're starting to make strides and people are starting to see the value. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 12 to 18 months, there was some meaningful change within the industry around supporting minority-owned managers and funds.
Thanks, Bono. That would be great to see. And maybe I'm an eternal optimist, but I do think there will be a change, and I think a change is happening. So let's watch this space over the next few months. Turning to Rodney. Rodney, you and I have had some interesting chats over the past few weeks about funds finance and funds finance being available for your fund. So I'll be really interested to get your view on, whether lenders are doing enough, whether they are focused enough on this when talking to potential borrowers like yourselves.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Leon. And I think what's quite curious as a diverse manager is that in many respects we're facing additional hurdles. First a hurdle as an emerging first-time fund manager, which is already quite challenging to say the least, and then you have the diversity lens on top. And I think we're working through those challenges slowly. Very similar to what Bola said. I think we are going to see some meaningful change over the next 12 to 18 months, and I'm quite optimistic about that. I think when you think about diversity, and I very much think about diversity as an emerging asset class, almost it's sort of separate to ESG in many respects. In the same way that social impact investing has now really been established as an asset class in its own right. I see diversity investing doing the same in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, and so we're breaking new ground, and we've got to recognise that's going to be quite challenging in the first instance. But persevering, working with the right LPs, where there's some long-term partnerships, is critical to that. And funds finance plays a really important role. One of the biggest challenges for diverse managers is having the runway to stay in the game long enough to have meaningful conversations with LPs. It typically takes 18 to 24 months to raise a first-time fund, and so funds finance can play an absolutely critical role in supporting diverse managers that are pursuing diverse strategies to enable them to continue to develop their proposition, refine their investment plan, build that track record, and then hopefully get to a point where they can raise a meaningful fund to prove out the thesis. And so that's one thing that I would suggest that would be a massive help, and something that hopefully the Funds Finance Association and the wider industry would take note of.
Thanks, Rodney. And Bruce, over to you. There we go. You've got a first-time manager saying that they need to be supported by the banks, and funds finance needs to help them. What's your take on that?
Thanks, Rodney. Yeah, we'll be in touch. Yeah, no, I think that is a very important point. I mean, I'm someone who is lucky enough to get involved in the E, the S, and the G where I work, and so and I was actually talking about the environment on a panel earlier today within the bank. But I found lots of questions coming up from bankers on that panel about the S and the G, and what more should we be doing. And maybe one thing I've observed is that we're trying to find lots of measures within banks around environment and the risks that can arise from that to inform our lending decisions. But on the social and on the governance side and the diversity that's in that, it's maybe hard to set measures about the risks that you're taking if you're not fully kind of taking that on board. So you can say, yes, it would be important to have diversity, and I'd like to see more of that. But are you truly finding measures of the risk of not doing so. That's what's much harder. And so I think we almost want to drive a perhaps a slightly, not statistically driven, but a more risk-focused decision to say this isn't a nice to have. You know, just in the same way that we don't want to be taking climate risks if we don't have to and we don't understand them, we shouldn't be taking those governance risks, and that includes diversity. So I think it is a topic that is growing within ESG, and it's a topic that has a lot of interest within the banks.
Thanks, Bruce. And I think you've hit the nail on the head as well. You know, diversity for me, you know, needs a helping hand. You know, we're already starting from a foot position, and therefore, you know, banks need to be incentivized to help funds like Rodney's and others who are really putting a lot of investment time into this. And I think we've seen that with ESG on the environmental side. Banks are kind of rolling over to try and do an ESG deal and get that away. So, you know, why don't they do that for ethnic and other forms of diversity as well? I'll hand over to Bron for the next question. I'm conscious of time. We've probably got around 6 or 7 minutes left, but I think, Bron, you had a quick question for Gurpreet, and then we can go back to the panel generally in terms of horizon scanning.
Yes, absolutely. I did have a hopefully fairly quick question, Gurpreet, aimed at you. Are you seeing a difference in approach between the large PE funds like KKR and the smaller VC funds? And where is most progress being made, do you think?
Okay, so I can honestly say that for those firms where there is a level of interest and intent to improve diversity, there's no difference in approach, whether you're a very large private equity firm or a smaller venture firm. We're the industry association here for both areas, and when I look at the data we've been working on collecting over the last few years on gender specifically, when you look at the percentage of investment professionals, senior women investment professionals, in venture it's 13%, in private equity it's 6%, and in LPs it's 21%. So that's looking at UK data. I still think it's too early to tell, because across all three segments, when you look at the junior pipeline, the percentages are all consistent, around 30%. So I think progress could be being made, but we don't know yet because we don't have the trend data. If I go back to my point around what we do in respect of the forums and network events that we host to talk about issues around D&I, everybody attends them, whether they're venture firms, private equity firms, our advisors come along, LPs are there as well. So yeah, some firms might not be doing as much in these areas as others, but there is certainly the level of interest is consistent across the different types of firms. I think if you're a larger firm, you do have more resources at hand. You could run programs for graduates, which is much harder for smaller firms. But what we're seeing across the piece is an interest in internships. So bringing people in with different backgrounds who probably would never have come across this industry before, and helping to increase the access to it.
Thank you, Gurpreet. Leon, I think we're running a little low on time, so I'll ping it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Bron. And look, for my part, you know, having spent time with Bola and Rodney at the two ends of the spectrum, both of these people are passionate about this area, and I think it's a great indication that you know, size doesn't matter. It's about you know, how focused you are on this and how passionate you are. And I would encourage any fund or VC or frankly other investor that's listening into this to really, you know, do what they can to enhance their focus on diversity. So as Bron said, we're almost out of time. So I'm just going to ask one question to all the panelists, just in terms of the year ahead, actually. And my question is, what would be the one most important change you would like to see in the funds finance industry in relation to ethnic diversity and inclusion? And how would you suggest achieving this in 2021 or beyond? And we'll start with Shima, as I know you and Mayor Brown are very heavily involved in the industry. Welcome your thoughts.
Sure, thanks, Leon. I would encourage sharing of ideas, having those honest conversations. I think this is still an area where a lot of people are reluctant to talk about D&I and what's happening in their own organizations. But only if you actually open those discussions and share those ideas will you then create the the momentum to drive the industry change. That is necessary. I think also you can there's easy wins. You can leverage each other's ideas. There's things that you can replicate across the businesses, and then the more organizations who do it, the more organizations who want a piece of the pie and want to tap in and see that
That's
they
great.
need to do that.
No,
also.
sharing is caring, as they say. Thanks, Shima. Bola, welcome your thoughts.
I would say the one thing is for organizations to recognize that there's a real focus beyond recruiting. I think the primary area where organizations lean in is representation, recognizing there's limited breadth of diversity within organizations. And so that feels like the first step, and really encourage organizations to think beyond that around what's your environment and how are you retaining and developing individuals, because it takes more than just bringing individuals on, but it's really important to ensure that those individuals feel a sense of inclusion and belonging and development, and that they have a real career path within the organization. And so starting to think about what are the levers that need to be adjusted and changed within your organization to address that particular component around retention.
Thanks, Bella. I think, for an organization like KKR, where obviously promotion could produce enormous gains, that could sometimes be quite daunting for someone quite junior. So I think that's a really good area of focus to give them those opportunities. Gurpreet.
So the area that I'm quite interested in is culture. So I'd encourage firms to think about whether the culture within your own firms actually supports a more diverse workforce. Because we often talk a lot about recruitment and promotion processes being more inclusive. But once people are in your organization, do they feel part of it? Now, think about things such as how you run your meetings and your social events, how alternative ideas and recommendations for change are considered, and also how expectations for progression within the organization are set and communicated. So while setting the tone at the top is crucial, I think individual team and line managers also have a really important role to play here, particularly when you're working with people who are quite new to the organisation or quite young.
Excellent. I'm being told we have like 1.5 minutes left, so quickly on to Bruce.
So I'm going to keep it really short. I'm going to say cognitive diversity. Realize that diversity is not just bringing more of the same in a different package. It's bringing different things, different ways of looking at things. So really try and focus on that. If that means going to more underprivileged backgrounds or finding people in different places, then that's all good. In terms of the time frame, multiple time frames. I think no one can set them. But an industry like fund finance that's growing, I think there's more leverage to do things quicker when you're growing than when you're static or when you're shrinking. Thank you.
Completely agree, Bruce. And Rodney, final word?
Yeah, very quickly, I'd just like to say that, I'd like to see the funds finance industry support the development and the emergence of talented, diverse managers, and for the narrative around diversity and inclusion to be seen as not simply an ESG issue, but a compelling commercial one as well. And I think that's really important. I think when we look at diversity beyond simply being a moral imperative, I do think the finance industry moves. Ultimately we're driven by commercial returns, and that will create sustainable impact in the long run. So that's the one thing that I would probably leave everyone with.
Great. A very fitting way to end the panel discussion. Thank you, Rodney. And look, for our part, this is about making sure investors are asking questions of fund managers around diversity and inclusion from an ethnic standpoint, as well as gender and environmental issues. Making sure that lenders in the industry are actually giving fund managers more advantageous margins if they're doing something which is of a diverse nature and helping the governance of the ESG. And then, most of all, and I think Shima actually made a really good point, everyone collaborating together to actually drive this. This is not something which should be competitive. This is something that should be collaborative. So with that, I want to say a massive thank you to all the panelists. I think, an amazing job, really good insight. And look, hopefully this is just the start of something that we can drive forward in the funds finance world here. If anyone would like to contribute to the diversity and inclusion initiatives that we're going to start rolling out over the coming months, please do contact me or any of the FFA board members. And I'd just like to say, wherever you are, have a good morning, good evening, or if you're in Asia, good night. Thank you very much. Goodbye.